I, 27 female, feel like an outsider in my family because I don't want kids. Posted by u/lonelyheart27. I grew up in a big, tight-knit family where nearly everyone followed the same path. Meet someone, settle down, have kids, and build a life together. It's the norm, and most of the people in my family seemed genuinely happy with that life. So, it's always felt odd that I somehow grew up without feeling the same way. Even as a kid, I didn't have the mommy instinct that my sister and cousins did. While they loved playing house or taking care of baby dolls, I was more into building Lego cities and playing pretend adventures. When I reached high school, my friends started talking about having families someday, and I still didn't feel the desire. It wasn't until I reached my mid-20s that I realized maybe I wasn't normal in the way my family would want me to be. Now, I'm 27, and the pressure is at an all-time high. Family gatherings have become a minefield. Every holiday or birthday is filled with comments about when I finally settle down and have kids, or thinly veiled remarks from my mom about how she can't wait to be a grandma. I know they mean well, and that they assume everyone wants the same things they do, but it hurts because they don't seem to see me as my own person. They see me as someone who's missing out on what they think is life's greatest joy. One of the hardest parts is that I actually love kids. I'm close to my little niece and nephew, and I adore spending time with them. I'm the fun aunt, and I love that role. But when I think about raising children myself, the responsibility and commitment feel overwhelming. I love my freedom, my time, and my ability to make spontaneous choices. I like the quiet moments in my life, the solitude, the freedom to explore my passions without limitations. I've tried to explain this to my parents a few times, and each time it feels like they're hearing me, but not understanding. They brush it off as just a phase and assume I'll change my mind once I meet the right person. The more they dismiss my feelings, the more I feel isolated. It's not just that they disagree with me, it's that they genuinely can't see that this decision isn't about immaturity or stubbornness. I'm happy with my choice, and it would mean a lot if they could just accept that. Lately, I found myself dreading family gatherings. I hate that I feel so different from the people I love, and I wish I could make them understand that their constant comments make me feel like an outsider. It's not that I don't want to belong, it's that I want to belong on my own terms, without feeling like my value is tied to whether I have kids or not. I'd love any advice on how to talk to my family about this, or at the very least, how to feel more at peace with my choice. 2. I, 22 male, lost my best friend over a fight about money, and I don't know how to move on. Posted by u/friendineed22. My best friend and I have been inseparable since middle school. We've been through everything together. Family issues, breakups, college stress, you name it. He's been like a brother to me, the one person who's always been there when I needed support or someone to talk to. I honestly never imagined a day where we wouldn't be friends. But a few months ago, things changed. My friend went through a rough patch about a year ago. He lost his job, got into debt, and was really struggling. I didn't hesitate to help. I gave him money to get him through the month, helped him find a place to stay, and even helped him network to find new job opportunities. He was really grateful, and I was just glad I could be there for him the way he'd always been there for me. After he got back on his feet, I figured he'd bring up paying me back. It wasn't a huge sum, but it was enough that it would make a difference to me. But he didn't mention it. I didn't want to be pushy, so I let it go for a few months. But as time passed, I started to feel a bit hurt. I didn't want to think he was taking advantage of me, but the lack of any acknowledgement stung. One night, I decided to bring it up. I kept it casual, just asking if he had any idea when he might be able to start paying me back. His reaction completely blindsided me. He got defensive, saying he thought I'd given him the money as a gift and that he felt betrayed I'd put a price tag on our friendship. It turned into a huge argument, with him accusing me of only caring about money and me feeling hurt that he couldn't see how much I'd supported him. Since then, we haven't spoken. He blocked me on social media, and the few mutual friends we have say he's still angry. I've gone from feeling hurt to feeling angry, and now, mostly, I just feel sad. It's hard to lose someone who's been such a big part of my life, and I don't know if it's worth trying to reach out. I miss my friend, but I also don't know if I can forgive him for how he treated me. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? How did you move on? 3. I, 30 female, moved to a new city for my partner, but now I feel completely alone. Posted by you/finding myself alone. About a year ago, I made a huge decision. I left my jobs, friends, and family to move to a new city with my boyfriend. He got his dream jobs, and we both agreed it was a fantastic opportunity for him. I thought it would be an adventure, that I'd find a new jobs quickly, make friends, and settle in easily. But things haven't gone the way I planned. Moving here, I couldn't find work in my field, so I ended up taking a part-time job that barely pays the bills. I thought I'd eventually meet people, but making friends as an adult is harder than I expected. Most days, it feels like I'm just going through the motions, trying to get through my shift and waiting for my boyfriend to come home. My boyfriend has been supportive, but I can tell he doesn't fully understand how much I'm struggling. His job keeps him busy, and he's doing well. He's happy, making friends, and thriving in this new environment. And while I'm genuinely happy for him, I feel like I'm fading into the background of his life. He encourages me to join clubs or pick up hobbies, but everything I try feels forced, like I'm just putting on a brave face. Recently, I've started wondering if I made a mistake moving here. I love him, but I can't shake this feeling of isolation. I'm worried that if I bring up how unhappy I am, it will create tension between us. I don't want him to feel guilty for chasing his dreams, but I also don't want to keep pretending everything's okay. Is it normal to feel this way when you move for someone else's dreams? How do I navigate this without making him feel responsible for my unhappiness? 4. I, 24 male, just found out I'm going to be a dad, and I don't feel ready. Posted by you/unexpected father 24. My girlfriend and I have been dating for almost a year, and we've had a great relationship. We both have careers we're focused on, plans to travel, and a shared vision of building a future together. But last week, everything changed when she told me she was pregnant. We were both shocked because we'd been careful, but sometimes life doesn't go as planned. At first, I felt numb, like I couldn't process the news. I'd always thought about being a dad someday, but that was in the distant future. Now, it feels like my whole life has been turned upside down, and I'm not sure how to move forward. I'm trying to be supportive because I know this isn't easy for her either. We've talked about what we want to do, and she's made it clear that she wants to keep the baby. I respect her decision, but a part of me feels like I'm being dragged into something I'm not prepared for. I feel guilty for even thinking this way, but I can't shake the feeling of being unprepared and trapped. How do I move past this initial fear and become the partner and future father that I want to be? 5. I, 35 female, just found out my parents lied about a big part of my childhood, posted by you/truthseeker35 a few weeks ago. During a family gathering, my aunt let something slip about my childhood that's been haunting me ever since. She mentioned that my parents had actually adopted me. I was completely blindsided. I always thought they were my biological parents. They never gave me any indication otherwise. My world feels like it's been flipped upside down. Since then, I've confronted my parents, and they admitted it. They explained that they'd wanted to tell me, but were worried it would make me feel different. I understand their reasoning, but I can't help but feel betrayed. All my life, I trusted them completely, and now I feel like there's this hidden part of me that they've been keeping from me. This discovery has made me question everything. It's hard to look at them the same way, even though they're still the same loving parents who raised me. But there's a sense of identity that's been shattered, and I'm struggling to figure out who I really am. How do I move forward? Do I start looking for my biological family, or is it better to let this stay in the past? AITA for dancing with someone else at the club while I was with my boyfriend? After we argued that night, I went home feeling completely confused and a bit hurt myself. My boyfriend, who I'll call Jake, barely spoke to me after that, and I wasn't sure if I should bring it up or let things cool down. I mean, from my perspective, I hadn't done anything to intentionally disrespect our relationship. Dancing with a stranger was innocent to me. It wasn't romantic or suggestive, just two people moving to the beat in a crowded room. But to Jake, it had crossed a line. The fact that I asked if I could dance with someone else was, to him, a signal that I was willing to put our relationship on the back burner for some attention from another guy. The days following the club incident were tense. I tried texting him, asking to meet up and talk about what had happened, but Jake was distant. He'd reply with short messages, keeping our conversations brief and emotionless. It was so out of character for him because he was usually the affectionate, easygoing one. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he wasn't telling me everything, like there was something bigger behind his reaction. When we finally met up a few days later, it was at a small coffee shop we both liked, where we'd gone many times before. As soon as I saw him, I could tell something was wrong. His face looked serious, almost pained, and he barely looked me in the eye when he sat down. After a few moments of awkward silence, I gathered the courage to ask him what was really going on. He let out a heavy sigh and said, "Look, I don't know how to put this, but I'm struggling to feel the same way about us after that night. I keep replaying the whole thing in my head, the fact that I was looking for you, worried, and then I find you talking to some random guy. And when you asked to dance with him, it was like, I don't know, it just hit me differently. I felt like you didn't care about how it'd make me feel. Hearing him say that was like a punch to the gut. I tried to explain that in my mind, it wasn't about choosing someone over him or wanting attention from someone else. I genuinely didn't think he would feel hurt because he had said yes. But Jake wasn't buying it. So you think it's normal to ask your boyfriend if you can dance with someone else? He asked, his tone somewhere between disbelief and frustration. Do you realize how embarrassing that was for me? I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt defensive, thinking it was just one dance. What's the big deal? But another part of me started to see things from his perspective. Jake had always been more reserved when it came to relationships, and he rarely talked about past girlfriends or jealousy issues. I started to wonder if this incident might have triggered some deeper insecurities for him that he hadn't shared. After what felt like an eternity of silence, he continued, "It just felt like I didn't matter to you in that moment. Like, you'd rather dance with someone you didn't even know than wait with me." I felt a lump forming in my throat. I didn't want to cry in the middle of the coffee shop, but hearing him express his hurt so plainly was more than I could take. In an attempt to salvage the situation, I reached for his hand across the table and said, "Jake, I'm so sorry. I really didn't mean to make you feel that way. I guess I didn't realize how important those boundaries were to you." For a moment, he softened, his eyes meeting mine. But then he pulled his hand back, looking down at his cup. "I don't know. Maybe I just need time to figure out if I can trust you again," he mumbled. That statement made my heart drop. Jake had never talked about trust issues before, and I couldn't believe that something as small as a dance could make him question our entire relationship. I tried to reason with him, explaining that it had been a one-time mistake, that I'd just been tipsy and hadn't thought things through. But he shook his head and muttered, "It's not just about that night. It's about how you view relationships, and maybe it's different from me." As the week went on, things didn't get better. Jake and I started seeing each other less and less, and when we did, it was like there was this invisible wall between us. He stopped being affectionate, and the warmth that used to fill our conversations was replaced by cold, polite exchanges. It felt like he was slowly slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. Finally, after another week of barely any contact, Jake asked if we could meet up again. This time, he sounded more serious than before, and I couldn't shake off a sinking feeling that he was going to break up with me. When we met, he was quiet, his face tense, and I could tell he was struggling with his words. "Look, I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I feel like I don't know who you are anymore. I thought we were on the same page about what we wanted in this relationship, but after what happened, I'm just not sure if we're right for each other." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, and I tried to keep my voice steady. "Jake, please don't say that. Can't we work through this? I promise I'll be more mindful of your feelings, and we can set boundaries together." But he shook his head, looking down. "It's not just about setting boundaries. It's about whether or not I feel respected and valued. And right now, I don't. I've tried to get over it, but every time I think about that night, I just feel hurt. In that moment, I realized that my actions had impacted him more deeply than I'd imagined. For him, it wasn't just about a dance. It was a symbol of how we approached our relationship. I tried to hold back my tears as I whispered, "So is this it? Are we done?" He looked at me, his face softened, and he said, "I don't want to hurt you, but I don't think I can keep pretending like things are okay when they're not." As I walked home that night, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. I felt a mix of guilt, sadness, and confusion. Was I really wrong for thinking a dance was harmless? Or was Jake overreacting? I replayed the entire situation in my mind, questioning every decision I'd made. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on, but the memory of that night lingered. Friends offered advice, some saying I'd done nothing wrong, while others suggested I should have been more considerate. It was a period of introspection for me, where I had to confront my own actions and understand the different ways people express love and commitment. Looking back, I can see that both of us could have handled things differently. Maybe if we'd communicated our boundaries earlier, we could have avoided the fallout. But life doesn't come with a handbook, and sometimes you only learn these lessons after the damage is done. I, 30 Farats, found out my husband, 32M, has a child from a previous relationship. Posted by u/unexpected_child30. I've always believed that honesty is the foundation of any relationship. My husband, Mark, and I had what I thought was an open, trusting marriage. After 5 years together, I felt that I knew every corner of his past. From the stories he'd shared about growing up in a small town, to the details of his first love in college. We laughed about it all. We shared stories, memories, even embarrassing moments from our teenage years. And yet, despite all that, there was something that he never told me, something that now feels like it threatens everything we've built together. It all started 2 weeks ago when I got an anonymous message from a social media account I didn't recognize. It was just a single sentence. "Your husband has a child he never told you about." I stared at it, feeling a range of emotions from disbelief to anger, and finally, a paralyzing sense of doubt. Could it be a prank? Some stranger trying to mess with our lives? I wanted to ignore it, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling. There was something about the message that felt so intentional. I confronted Mark that evening, not with an accusation, but a plea. I needed to hear it from him that the message was just some malicious lie. But as soon as I asked, his face changed. I saw the color drain from his cheeks, his shoulders slumping. He didn't look shocked or confused. He looked defeated. And that's when I knew it was true. Mark admitted that he'd had a relationship in his early 20s, long before we'd met. They'd been together for almost 2 years when she told him she was pregnant. But the relationship had already been on shaky ground, and after the baby was born, they parted ways. His ex didn't want him involved in the child's life, and he, still young and uncertain, took that as a way out. As he explained all this, my heart ached. I could understand that he'd been young and unsure, but what I couldn't understand was why he'd hidden it from me. I asked him, Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have judged you." He just sat there, quiet, his eyes full of shame. "I was afraid, Katie," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want you to think less of me. I didn't want you to think that I abandoned someone I should have cared for. I've lived with the guilt for so long, and I thought if I kept it buried, maybe it would just go away. But secrets never just go away, do they?" For the next week, the atmosphere in our home felt strained and tense. I couldn't look at him the same way. I kept picturing this child, a child who must be around 10 years old now, living somewhere out there, without knowing that his father wanted nothing to do with him. It felt like a betrayal, not just to the child, but to me as well. This was a part of Mark, a significant part that he'd hidden from me. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if he could hide this, what else could he be hiding? Every night, I lay awake, torn between anger and sorrow. I thought about how our marriage had seemed so perfect, so strong. We'd always talked about having children together one day, and now I couldn't see a clear path forward. How could I bring a child into this marriage, knowing what I did, knowing that he'd already abandoned one child? After a week of agonizing silence, I decided I couldn't keep the pain bottled up. I asked Mark if he'd be willing to go to counseling with me. I knew we needed help to navigate this if we had any hope of moving forward. To my relief, he agreed, and we began seeing a marriage counselor together. In those sessions, I began to understand his perspective more. He'd been a scared, immature kid, thrown into a situation he wasn't prepared for. But understanding didn't take away the hurt. As the sessions progressed, I realized I needed to meet this child. If there was any chance of healing, I needed to know who they were. I needed to see for myself the person who had been such a significant part of Mark's life, even if only in the shadows. When I suggested this to Mark, he hesitated, but finally agreed. We reached out to his ex through mutual friends, and to my surprise, she was open to the idea of us meeting her child. She seemed to understand my need for closure, and maybe she hoped it would bring some resolution for her child as well. So, a few weeks later, Mark and I found ourselves at a park, waiting to meet the child he'd once left behind. When they arrived, my heart raced. She was a girl, about 10 years old, with Mark's dark eyes and his smile. She was shy at first, hiding behind her mother, but gradually warmed up as we talked. I watched as Mark interacted with her, saw the guilt and longing in his eyes, and felt my heart soften. Here was a child who had done nothing wrong, who deserved so much more than she'd been given. After the meeting, Mark and I sat together in silence. We'd come face to face with his past, and it was both painful and healing in ways I hadn't expected. I could see that he wanted to be part of her life now, that he wanted to make up for lost time. And while part of me resented the idea of sharing him with a past he'd hidden, another part of me wanted to help him build that bridge. For his sake, and for hers. In the months that followed, we continued therapy. Mark began taking steps to be a part of his daughter's life, slowly and carefully, respecting her boundaries and her mother's wishes. And as for me, I learned to forgive, to let go of the anger and resentment I'd carried. It wasn't easy, There were days when I doubted our marriage could survive, when I questioned if I'd ever fully trust him again. But I also saw how much he'd changed, how deeply he regretted his past actions. And in the end, I realized that our marriage wasn't defined by this one mistake. It was defined by how we chose to move forward, by our commitment to each other and to the family we were building together, even if that family was a little more complicated than I'd once imagined. Looking back, I'm not sure if I would have chosen this path had I known about his past from the start. But life doesn't give us do-overs. It only gives us the chance to learn, to grow, and to choose forgiveness when it's deserved. And in this case, despite everything, I believe it was. My girlfriend, 29 Farads, is pregnant, but we haven't discussed marriage or long-term plans. Posted by you/future_unsure29. My girlfriend and I have been together for 3 years, and while we've talked about a future together, we've never discussed marriage or kids in concrete terms. Now she's pregnant, and I feel both joy and panic. I love her, but I'm not sure I'm ready for this level of commitment yet. She seems overjoyed, talking about baby names and nursery plans, and I feel horrible for not being on the same page. I want to support her, but I also don't want to rush into something I'm not ready for. How do I handle these conflicting feelings without hurting her? I, 27M, have been supporting my family financially for years, and it's draining me. Posted by you/family_duty27. After my father lost his job, I became the main breadwinner for my family. I support my parents, my younger siblings, and sometimes even extended family. I'm proud to help them, but lately it's been taking a toll on me. I'm constantly stressed, and I haven't been able to save anything for my future. I feel trapped. If I stop helping, my family might struggle. But if I keep going, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up this pace. How do I find a balance between supporting my family and taking care of myself? I, 29 Farads, just found out my boyfriend, 30M, is marrying someone else in an arranged marriage. Posted by you/heartbroken_and_confused29. I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for 2 years. He's from a culture where arranged marriages are common, but he always reassured me that he had no interest in it. Now, out of nowhere, he's told me that he's agreed to an arranged marriage his parents set up. He says he loves me, but feels obligated to his family. I'm devastated. I thought we had a future together, and now he's leaving me for someone he barely knows. I feel like our entire relationship was a lie. Do I try to fight for him, or accept that he's made his choice? My mother has been hiding a terminal illness from me for years. Posted by you/betrayed_by_truth29. My mom and I have always been close, so I was shocked when I found out she's been dealing with a terminal illness for years. She kept it a secret, telling only a few close family members. I stumbled upon her medical records by accident and confronted her. She said she didn't want to worry me or change our relationship, but I feel hurt and betrayed. I would have been there for her every step of the way, and now I feel like I missed out on precious time with her. How do I move forward knowing I could lose her soon? My fiance, 32M, confessed he's still in love with his high school sweetheart, posted by you/lost_and_confused32. After 4 years together and an engagement, my fiance recently admitted he's still in love with his high school girlfriend. He says he loves me too, but a recent run-in with her brought back all his unresolved feelings. I'm devastated and feel completely blindsided. We were planning our future, and now I'm questioning if he's ever really loved me. He says he's committed to our relationship, but won't deny his feelings for her. Can I move forward with someone who's still hung up on the past, or is it better to let go before we get married? I, 28 Farads, found out my boyfriend, 29M, has a daughter from a previous relationship, and it turned my world upside down. Part 1. The picture-perfect relationship. I always considered myself a pragmatic person. When I met Aaron at a mutual friend's party, I wasn't looking for love. I had recently come out of a long-term relationship that had left me emotionally drained. But everything felt like a fairy tale from the moment I laid eyes on him. He was tall, with curly brown hair and an easy smile that lit up the room. We clicked instantly, sharing laughs and stories late into the night. As we moved into our first year together, life was blissful. We both had good jobs, me as a marketing manager and him as an architect, and our cozy apartment became a sanctuary filled with laughter, coffee dates, and spontaneous adventures. Aaron was my rock, and I felt a deep sense of security with him. We enjoyed lazy weekends, cooking together and binge watching our favorite shows. However, despite the happiness, there were moments of unease. I noticed that Aaron would often receive calls or messages he quickly dismissed when I entered the room. Whenever I asked him about his past relationships, he would evade the topic, changing the subject or giving vague answers. I respected his boundaries, but a nagging feeling began to settle in my stomach. Part 2. The Discovery. One Sunday afternoon, while Aaron was out running errands, I decided to do some light cleaning. As I straightened up the living room, I stumbled upon a small, hidden drawer in the side table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were a few old letters, a small notebook, and a picture of a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, wearing a bright pink dress and holding a teddy bear. My heart raced. The girl looked so happy, and I could tell from the scribbled notes nearby that they were written from her perspective. "I miss you, Daddy. Can we have ice cream next time?" My breath caught in my throat. Who was this little girl? When Aaron returned, I confronted him. "Who is this girl?" I held up the photo, my voice shaking. His face went pale. "Emily, I can explain." Part 3. The truth comes out. We sat down, and Aaron finally revealed the truth. Her name is Lily. She's my daughter from a previous relationship. The words felt like a punch to my gut. I struggled to process what he was saying. "You have a daughter? And you never told me?" I wanted to protect you from the chaos that comes with it. Her mother and I split up before I even met you. I didn't want to complicate our relationship, he explained, desperation in his voice. But this is a huge part of your life. How could you keep this from me? I felt a mix of betrayal and confusion. Do you see her? Do you even have a relationship with her? Aaron looked away, his gaze heavy. I try to see her when I can, but her mother and I have a complicated situation. I never wanted you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. Part 4. The emotional turmoil. After our conversation, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, heartbroken, and confused. For weeks, I had thought I knew everything about Aaron, and now it felt like I was standing on shaky ground. How could I have been so blind to this major part of his life? As the days passed, I found myself in a state of turmoil. I tried to rationalize his choices. Perhaps he thought he was protecting me, but how could he expect to build a future together without sharing such a crucial piece of himself? I felt an overwhelming need to know more about Lily. I decided to confront my feelings head on. One evening, I asked Aaron if I could meet Lily. He hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "Are you sure you want to do that?" "Yes. If she's a part of your life, then I want to be a part of hers," I replied, my heart racing at the thought of meeting his daughter. Part 5. A new beginning. A few days later, Aaron finally agreed, and we arranged to meet at a local park. As we walked toward the playground, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would Lily think of me? Would she accept me as part of her father's life? When we arrived, Lily was there, playing on the swings. She looked so much like Aaron, with bright blue eyes and a head full of curly brown hair. My heart softened as I approached, and I could feel Aaron's nervous energy beside me. "Hey, Lily," he called out, and her face lit up at the sound of his voice. She jumped off the swing and ran toward him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy," she squealed, and the sight was enough to bring tears to my eyes. As they embraced, I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. Maybe this wasn't the chaos I had feared, maybe it was an opportunity for growth. I crouched down to Lily's level, offering her a warm smile. "Hi there, I'm Emily. It's so nice to meet you." Lily looked at me curiously, her innocent eyes assessing me. "Are you going to be my new friend?" Part 6. Building bridges. In that moment, my heart melted. "I would love to be your friend, Lily. Would you like to play together?" The afternoon unfolded beautifully. We played games, shared stories, and even had a picnic that Aaron had prepared. I could see the joy in Lily's eyes as she laughed and ran around, and I realized that she was a wonderful child, innocent and full of life. As the sun began to set, I felt a sense of hope wash over me. I might not have known about Lily before, but I had a chance now to embrace this new reality. I was building a bridge between my life and Aaron's past, and it felt good. Later, as we drove home, Aaron reached for my hand. "Thank you for being so amazing today. I was so scared of how you would react." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm still processing everything, but I want to be part of your life, and Lily's too. Just promise me that you won't keep any more secrets." "I promise," he said, his voice steady. "I love you, Emily." "I love you too, Aaron," I replied, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. Together, we could navigate the complexities of our new reality, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. Part 7. The challenges ahead. As time went on, I embraced my role as part of Lily's life. But that didn't mean it was easy. Each interaction brought new challenges and revelations. Aaron's relationship with Lily's mother, Sarah, was fraught with tension. They had ended things on bad terms, and it was clear that unresolved issues lingered between them. I remember one particularly difficult evening when Aaron received a text from Sarah. He went pale as he read it, his expression shifting from surprise to anxiety. "I need to talk to Sarah," he said, his voice low. "What happened?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "She wants to discuss some changes to our custody arrangement. It's complicated," he replied, running his fingers through his hair. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "But we've finally started to build something with Lily. Why now?" "It's not about us, it's about her," Aaron said, trying to reassure me. "I understand that, but I just wish we could have some stability," I confessed. The tension between us was palpable. I wanted to support him, but the uncertainties surrounding Lily's custody felt like a storm cloud hanging over our heads. Part 8. Navigating Co-Parenting. When we finally met Sarah, I was anxious but determined to make the best of it. We arranged a meeting at a local cafe, hoping to keep things civil for the sake of Lily. Sarah walked in, and I immediately sensed the tension in the air. She was beautiful, with an air of confidence that made me feel small. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her tone cool but polite. "I want to make sure we're on the same page for Lily." As we discussed the logistics of co-parenting, I could see Aaron's discomfort. He wanted to be diplomatic, but it was clear that their unresolved feelings were bubbling beneath the surface. When the conversation turned to Lily's schooling, I felt a surge of frustration. "I think it's important for her to have stability, especially with everything that's been happening," I interjected. "Stability? She has a life with me, and I need to ensure that she's happy," Sarah shot back, her eyes narrowing. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was about Lily. "I agree. We all want her to be happy, but we also have to consider how our decisions impact her." The discussion was tense, but I could see Aaron's appreciation for my support. Afterward, as we drove home, he turned to me, gratitude evident in his eyes. "You handled that well," he said, his voice warm. "I just want what's best for Lily," I replied, trying to suppress the whirlwind of emotions within me. But I can't help feeling like we're all walking on eggshells. "We'll figure it out together," he reassured me, reaching for my hand. Part 9. Bonding with Lily. In the weeks that followed, I found myself growing closer to Lily. We started a tradition of spending weekends together, exploring parks, going to the zoo, and indulging in ice cream. I cherished our time together, feeling a growing sense of attachment to her. One sunny Saturday, as we sat on a picnic blanket, Lily looked up at me with her big blue eyes. "Emily, do you like spending time with me?" My heart swelled. "Of course I do. You're so much fun. I love our adventures together." "Will you be my forever friend?" she asked innocently, her little fingers clutching her teddy bear. I felt a rush of emotion. "I would love that, Lily. I want to be a part of your life for a long time." That day, we painted rocks together, giggling as we splashed each other with paint. In those moments, I realized that despite the complications of co-parenting, I was forging a bond with this sweet little girl, and it felt like magic. Part 10. The complications resurface just when I thought things were settling down. The complexities of Aaron's past resurfaced. One evening, he received an unexpected call from Sarah, and I could see the tension in his posture as he listened. After hanging up, he turned to me, looking concerned. "She wants to talk about a potential move," he said, his voice heavy. "What kind of move?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "She's considering moving to a different city for a job opportunity," Aaron explained, running a hand through his hair. "It would mean that Lily might have to move away from us." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. But we just started building a life with her. We can't let this happen. "I know," Aaron said, his expression pained. "I need to talk to her about it, but I'm not sure how she'll react." The uncertainty loomed over us like a storm cloud. I wanted to be supportive, but I also felt the weight of our budding family slipping through our fingers. The following week, Aaron and I decided to meet with Sarah again. We gathered at the same cafe, but this time the atmosphere felt heavier. Aaron took a deep breath, clearly preparing himself for the conversation. "Sarah, I appreciate you meeting with us. We need to talk about Lily's future," he began, his tone serious. "I know, and I've been thinking about it a lot," she replied, crossing her arms defensively. "We both want what's best for her," I chimed in, trying to ease the tension. "But moving away would impact her stability, and she's just started to form a bond with me." Sarah narrowed her eyes at me, clearly unamused. "This isn't about you, it's about what's best for Lily. I need to think about her future too." I felt a pang of frustration, but held my ground. "I understand that, but we need to consider how moving affects her emotionally. She's finally finding her place here." The conversation turned heated, with Aaron trying to mediate between us. I could see the tension between him and Sarah, and I wondered if it would ever fully dissipate. Afterward, as we drove home, I turned to Aaron, my heart heavy. "What if she moves? What will that mean for us?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice laced with uncertainty. "But I'll fight for her. I won't let her go without a fight." Part 12. A moment of clarity. In the weeks that followed, we tried to navigate the chaos. I immersed myself in spending time with Lily, cherishing every moment. We had a sleepover one weekend where we watched movies, made popcorn, and built a fort in the living room. As we snuggled under the blanket, I felt an overwhelming sense of love for her. "Emily, are you going to be my new mommy?" she asked, her voice soft and innocent. The question took me by surprise. "Oh, sweetie, I want to be a big part of your life, but I'm not your mommy," I replied gently. She looked disappointed but nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I like you. Can you stay with us forever?" Tears pricked at my eyes. "I would love that, Lily. I care about you so much." In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about Aaron and his past. It was about building a future with Lily too. I wanted to be there for her, to support her through life's ups and downs. Part 13. The heartfelt conversation. After the sleepover, I knew I needed to talk to Aaron about my feelings. One evening, as we sat on the couch, I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Aaron, I've been thinking a lot about us and our future. He looked at me, curiosity in his eyes. What's on your mind? I want to be more involved in Lily's life. I care about her deeply, and I want to be a stable figure for her, I confessed, my heart racing. Aaron smiled, and I could see the appreciation in his eyes. I'm so glad to hear that. She needs someone like you. But what happens if Sarah moves? I don't want to lose her, I admitted, my voice shaking. I won't let that happen, he promised, determination in his tone. We'll figure it out together. We spent the evening talking about our hopes and fears for the future. I felt a sense of relief knowing we were on the same page and that we could face whatever challenges lay ahead as a team. Part 14. A Ray of Hope. A few weeks later, we received some unexpected news. Aaron had been in regular contact with Sarah about the potential move, and during one of their discussions, she agreed to stay in the area for Lily's sake. When Aaron shared the news with me, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This is great. We can continue to build our lives together, I said, feeling a sense of hope. Yes, but it also means we need to start thinking about how to navigate co-parenting more effectively, he replied, a thoughtful expression on his face. We began to develop a co-parenting plan that worked for all of us, establishing clear boundaries and expectations. I felt empowered, knowing that we were working together to create a stable environment for Lily. Part 15. A New Normal. As months passed, we developed a new routine. Aaron and I learned to communicate openly, discussing Lily's needs and making decisions together. I took on a more active role in her life, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. One Saturday, we took Lily to a local festival. We wandered through colorful booths, sampled delicious food, and enjoyed live music. As we sat on a blanket, watching the sunset, I turned to Aaron, feeling a sense of gratitude. I can't believe how far we've come, I said, leaning against him. Me neither. I'm so glad we're in this together, he replied, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. As the festival lights twinkled around us, I realized that despite the challenges, we were building a beautiful life together. Part 16. A Family Outing. One weekend, we decided to take a family trip to the beach. It was a warm summer day, and the excitement in Lily's eyes was infectious. We packed a picnic and headed out, eager to create more memories together. At the beach, we built sand castles, splashed in the waves, and enjoyed a fun-filled day. I watched Aaron and Lily play in the water, her laughter ringing in my ears. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and belonging. Emily, come help us, Lily called, her sandy hands waving at me. I ran over, joining in on their playful antics. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the beach, I realized that I had become a part of something beautiful, a family. But just when everything seemed perfect, life threw another curveball our way. A few weeks after our beach trip, Sarah reached out to discuss a change in their custody arrangement again. I could sense the anxiety in Aaron's voice as he explained the situation to me. She wants to increase her visitation days, and I'm not sure how to respond, he said, Frustration etched on his face. "What do you want to do?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I want to make sure Lily's happiness comes first, but I also don't want to feel like I'm losing her," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe we can meet with her and discuss our concerns together," I suggested, hoping to ease some of his worries. Aaron nodded, grateful for my support. "That sounds like a good plan." Part 18. The meeting. When we met with Sarah, the conversation was tense but civil. I could see the determination in her eyes as she presented her case for wanting more time with Lily. "I believe it's essential for Lily to spend more time with me," she argued. "I want her to know both of her parents." "We agree with that," Aaron said, his voice steady. "But we also want to ensure that the time she spends with each of us is meaningful," I chimed in. "Lily is still adjusting to everything. We want her to feel secure and loved, not pulled in different directions." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but she still pushed for more time. "I understand your concerns, but I believe it's important for her development to have a solid relationship with both parents." The conversation ended with no clear resolution, and as we left, I could feel the tension lingering in the air. Part 19. Finding common ground. After the meeting, I sensed that Aaron was feeling discouraged. "I just want what's best for Lily," he said, frustration seeping into his voice. "I know you do," I replied, wanting to comfort him. "Maybe we should focus on finding common ground. We both care about her and want her to be happy." "You're right," he said, taking a deep breath. "I think if we approach this as a team, we might find a solution that works for all of us." As we brainstormed ideas for how to communicate our concerns to Sarah, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps, if we worked together, we could find a way to ensure Lily's happiness while maintaining a stable environment. Part 20. The compromise. In the days that followed, Aaron and I put together a proposal outlining our suggestions for Lily's custody arrangement. We emphasized the importance of quality time and shared activities to foster a sense of belonging for Lily. When we met with Sarah again, we presented our plan, highlighting how we could all work together to create a balanced environment for Lily. "I appreciate your effort in coming up with this," Sarah said, looking over our proposal. "It shows that you both care." After discussing the details, we reached a compromise that allowed Sarah more visitation time while ensuring Lily's stability. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing we were all on the same page for Lily's sake. Part 21. Building a stronger foundation. As time went on, our co-parenting arrangement became more harmonious. Aaron and I continued to build our lives together, and I found myself increasingly immersed in Lily's world. We attended her school events, cheered her on at soccer games, and celebrated milestones together as a family. One evening, as we sat on the couch, I looked at Aaron, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you," I said softly. He smiled, pulling me closer. "We make a great team, Emily." In that moment, I realized that the love I felt for Lily and Aaron was growing stronger, and I couldn't imagine my life without them. Part 22. A celebration of family. To celebrate our newfound harmony, we planned a family dinner. I cooked Lily's favorite meal, and as we sat around the table, laughter filled the air. "Emily, this is the best dinner ever!" Lily exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. I couldn't help but smile. "I'm glad you like it, sweet girl." As we enjoyed our meal, I looked around the table, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and belonging. This was my family, and I cherished every moment spent with them. Part 23. Embracing the future. As the seasons changed, so did our family dynamics. I found myself becoming more involved in Lily's life, celebrating birthdays, attending school events, and making new memories together. One day, as we walked in the park, I turned to Lily. "What's your favorite thing about our family?" She thought for a moment, then replied, "I love that we're all together. It makes me happy." My heart swelled with emotion. "That's what I love too, Lily. You make our family complete." In that moment, I knew that despite the challenges we had faced, we had created something beautiful. We were a family, bonded by love and resilience. Part 24. A new adventure. As summer approached, we decided to take a family trip to a nearby amusement park. The excitement in the air was palpable as we rode roller coasters, played games, and indulged in cotton candy. I watched as Lily and Aaron laughed together, the joy radiating from their faces. It was moments like these that made all the challenges worthwhile. As we stood in line for the Ferris wheel, I took a moment to reflect on how far we had come. The journey hadn't always been easy, but every challenge had brought us closer together. "Ready for the ride of your life?" I joked, nudging Lily playfully. "Yes," she squealed, her excitement infectious. As we rode the Ferris wheel, the view from the top was breathtaking. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the family we had built, and I couldn't wait to see where the future would take us. Part 25. The power of love. With each passing day, I realized that love was the most powerful force in our lives. It was love that brought Aaron and me together, love that connected us to Lily, and love that helped us navigate the challenges we faced. As we settled into our new normal, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead. We were a family, united by our bond and ready to embrace whatever came our way. In the end, it was love that triumphed over everything. And as I looked at Aaron and Lily, I knew that together we could overcome any obstacle that life threw at us. My wife wants us to be custodian over her niece, 16, while her sister moves overseas to find herself. I'm the retired one. I normally read most of these and think they are beef stew, but I will post my own real struggle I have been dealing with for the past 2 weeks. Some background. I have raised 2 children already. The oldest is already married and has a child on the way. The youngest has a full-time career and is in a serious relationship. This is my second marriage. My wife is 13 years younger than I am, and she is the mother to my youngest child. My wife is extremely close with her family, whereas I am not. My family is quite a distance away, whereas my wife's family is all local. My wife's sister is 35 years old and recently separated. She was with her husband for about 14 years, and he is the father of their one child, who is almost 16. Upon separation, The soon-to-ex-husband went across the country to Seattle, where he met a new woman, and they live in a small apartment. My wife's sister and child remained back near us. My wife's sister has now decided that she wants to go teach English as a second language in Poland to re-find herself. My wife is extremely supportive of this and volunteered us to watch after my niece while this occurs, as her father is unable to host her due to his current living situation, and she does not want to uproot her from school. My wife's sister has dual citizenship, so she can stay there for an extended amount of time if she decides to. I have been vehemently against this for several reasons, and it is causing a major strain on our marriage. I have already raised a teenage girl. I don't want to relive the horror. I additionally am just recently retired after working nearly 30 years straight, and as much as I want to stay active, I do not want to be the chauffeur or liability chauffeur for various sporting events that my niece participates in. I spoke with my niece about this, obviously not expressing my concerns or disdain for the idea, and she just wants to stay local and be with her friends. As much as I want this for her, I do not want to be the host of this. My wife says I'm being an asterisk hole, as do her other siblings who all suddenly have excuses. My niece is a good kid, and I am not worried about any issues per se. I am just not a fan of someone abandoning their responsibility to go play overseas. AITA. Edit. Well, this blew up more than expected. For those calling me an off for the teenage daughter comment, it was a joke. As I stated in a comment, my son was worst. Also a joke. My attempt at being shifty by changing a few things to remain incognito did not go so well, and this was found by an old coworker who knew the situation and forwarded it up the chain till it hit the wife. My wife, Sil, I like this abbreviation, niece, and I just had a nice FaceTime conversation in which it was decided it would be best for her to finish school before her mother explores her other goals. Sil acknowledged it was not the right time, and she was being rash. I acknowledged, even though the popular opinion is me not being the awe. My response to my wife has been very ahish, and I recognize that. 30-ish years of work has made me exceptionally standoff/dickish, and I am recognizing that and working on it. Some of your comments were very helpful, so thank you, strangers. But Mike, you're a dick. AITA for accidentally embarrassing my girlfriend? So, Friday night, my girlfriend, 18 Farads, and I, 18M, went to a party hosted by one of her friends. It was a pretty laid-back gathering, lots of mutual friends, people just hanging out and catching up. I figured it would be a good chance to relax, see some buddies, and let loose a little. At one point, I was talking with a couple of my close friends, and, as friends do, we got on the topic of relationships. I'll admit, I was feeling a little frustrated lately. I let it slip that Michaela seemed to be looking for reasons to argue lately. I said she had been picking at small things like my choice of clothes not being nice-looking enough, that I didn't seem invested enough in our future, and that I wasn't being romantic enough. It's not like I said anything super bad. It just felt like every day there was a new issue. My friends mostly just nodded along, sharing some of their own experiences. It was a casual, friendly vent session. Nothing serious, and certainly not meant to paint Michaela in a bad light. I didn't think it was a big deal. It was just a little frustration I needed to let out. But apparently, word spread quickly. About 45 minutes later, Michaela pulled me aside, looking pretty hurt and upset. She told me she'd heard from a couple of people that I'd been saying she was always looking for fights. She said it made her look bad, like she was constantly nagging or trying to pick at me, and she was embarrassed that people thought she was being unreasonable. I tried to explain that I hadn't meant for it to come out like that I wasn't intentionally putting her on blast or anything. I was just frustrated in the moment and needed to get it off my chest. But that didn't really seem to make things better. She told me I'd made her look awful in front of her friends, which wasn't something I'd even thought about. She asked me to take her home, and the car ride back was dead silent. Every time I tried to say something, she just sat there, staring out the window. Since Friday, I've been calling her, sending texts, leaving messages, apologizing, and trying to explain myself. I told her I love her, that it wasn't meant to hurt her, and that I was sorry if I'd made her look bad. I even sent her flowers, but I still haven't gotten a single response. I genuinely feel bad. I get why she's hurt, but at the same time, it was just a small vent to a couple of friends, and I didn't mean for it to become some kind of public thing. Part of me feels like I should be able to share my frustrations with my friends, but another part feels like maybe I crossed a line without even realizing it. So, Reddit, AITA for losing my marbles at my neighbors for parking across my driveway. I live in a small residential area that sits right next to a busy business. The business itself isn't the problem. The employees, however, have become my personal nightmare. They keep parking across my driveway, blocking me in, and disregarding the fact that it's illegal and completely inconsiderate. This has been going on for months, and despite my polite requests, nothing seems to change. I've tried everything. I've left notes on cars, knocked on the business's doors to ask them to move, and even talked to the manager. But every time, it's the same. They apologize, promise it won't happen again, and then it does. It's infuriating, to say the least. One day, it hit a boiling point. I was supposed to get to an important doctor's appointment surgery. Actually, I was all ready to go, only to find a car parked across my driveway, completely blocking me in. I honked, knocked, waited around, and finally had to call a friend to pick me up, making me late. The whole ordeal left me seething, but at the time, I didn't confront anyone because I just wanted to move on with my day. Still, I knew something had to change. Fast forward to today. I came home and saw that a familiar car was parked across my driveway again, and this time it was one of the same employees who had done it multiple times before. I'd warned them repeatedly, and they kept disregarding it. This time, I decided I wasn't going to let it slide. Instead of knocking or leaving a note, I simply parked my car right behind theirs, effectively blocking them in, and went inside. My thought was that if they were going to inconvenience me, they could have a taste of their own medicine. About half an hour later, I heard someone banging on my door. I opened it to find the owner of the car, an employee I'd spoken to several times about this exact issue, looking furious. They yelled about how I was trapping them and how it was unbelievably rude of me to park them in. At that point, all my patience was gone, and I lost it. I told them off, saying it was illegal and disrespectful to park across my driveway, especially since they'd been warned multiple times. I said I'd had enough of their excuses and would be calling the police. They were stunned, and that's when the real insults started. They called me the meanest homeowner on the street and a grumpy old neighbor with nothing better to do. That struck a nerve because, honestly, I'm not the type to blow up at people like this. But they had been blocking me in for months, causing countless issues, and were now acting as if I was the unreasonable one. So I did call the police, and they eventually came out to address the situation. The police gave the employee a citation for illegal parking and noted that they'd been informed of the issue multiple times by me, which made it all the more egregious. And I went a step further. I called the business's CEO to make a formal complaint about the ongoing disrespect from their employees, explaining how it was affecting my daily life. Since then, some of my neighbors have said I went overboard and could have handled it differently, even though they understand the frustration. Some suggested I should have just left another note or tried to ignore it, and others said I was well within my rights to put my foot down. I get that I might have overreacted, but this has been building up for so long that I finally snapped. So Reddit, AITA for losing my marbles at my neighbors and escalating this. Or should I have continued to be the bigger person and ignored it?
AITA for not making my schedule work so my youngest stepsister could go to a party. There's some background that will provide some context about why Dad's angry at me. My mom died when I, 17 meters, was 7. My brother was 6. When we were 10 and 11, our dad remarried. My dad's wife came with 3 daughters. Her youngest is a half-sister to the 2 older ones. Older 2 are 16 and 14. Her youngest is 9. My dad and his wife also have a 4 and a 2-year-old together. So one thing that I should mention is my dad's wife lost her first husband, the dad of the older 2. Her youngest was conceived not long after her husband's death. The dad of her youngest didn't want to know, and the girls never forgave her or got over her doing that so fast, and they hate my youngest stepsister. My brother and I don't hate anyone, but being honest, I see him differently to the steps and halves. I love my brother. I'd say he's my real sibling, while the others are steps and halves. I guess I'd say I'm mostly indifferent to them. I don't dislike them, but I don't have their back always like I do for him. He's pretty much the same. Older steps don't like any of the rest of us and are hostile. The youngest step really wants her older sisters to love her. She doesn't really notice the rest of us. But it's very easy to see it breaks her heart when the other 2 want nothing to do with her, and they treat her like she's disgusting. The youngest 2 are really little, but will play together. My dad and his wife had this dream that we'd be a way closer family unit and that we'd be more like an actual family than we are. Dad has talked to me about being the person who brings us all together as the oldest in the family. He told me I have such a good relationship with my brother, and he wants us to have the same with the others. He asked me like a year ago if I didn't want that, and I said no, which made him interact with me differently. This all brings us to yesterday. Youngest stepsister was supposed to be going to a birthday party. Dad was already at work. His wife was really sick. I had work too, but in the past I called and said I'd be late to do something for my brother. My boss is cool with stuff like that. Oldest stepsister was going to a friend's house and was passing the house the party was at, but she refused to take youngest stepsister. She left while her mom was trying to get her to take her. Middle stepsister also refused and left the house as well. My brother wasn't home, and I left for work while Dad's wife was comforting youngest stepsister, who was upset my other stepsisters wouldn't take her. When I got home last night, Dad called me in as asterisk hole, and he told me I could have taken her, and if she was my brother, I would have called to be late to work and taken him. He told me I had the chance to really reach out and create a bond between me and her. And I didn't, and I showed him that I will always have a favorite and never try to hide it. He told me he's sick of the two of us sticking by each other, but not doing the same for the others. AITA. AITA, because I don't want a friend to bring a guy into my apartment. All right, here's the situation. My friend, let's call her Sarah, asked if she could stay at my place for a weekend while she was in town for a big party. I was happy to help her out, especially since I wasn't even going to be home that weekend. It seemed like a win-win. She'd have a place to stay for free, and I'd have peace of mind in knowing my apartment was in good hands with someone I trusted. Sarah and I go way back, college roommates, years of friendship, the whole deal. I've known her long enough to know that we have different comfort levels, particularly when it comes to personal boundaries. Sarah is very outgoing, social, and let's say, adventurous. She's never been one to shy away from dating or hookups, which has always been totally fine with me. I respect her choices and have never judged her for them. I, on the other hand, am a bit more reserved, especially with my space. My apartment is my sanctuary. I'm not particularly thrilled with the idea of someone I don't know well, especially a stranger, in my private space. Before she came, I decided to address this with her. It was a bit awkward, but I figured it was better to be clear up front than to have any misunderstandings later. I told Sarah that, while she was absolutely welcome to stay at my place, I'd really prefer if she didn't bring anyone back with her. I tried to frame it politely, explaining that I have a thing about strangers in my home. Maybe it sounds a bit prudish, but that's just how I feel. Now, here's where things took a turn. Sarah was taken aback and seemed genuinely upset. She insisted that she'd never bring someone back to my place, saying she respected my space and would never do anything to make me uncomfortable. But there was a definite chill after that, and she didn't seem to take it well. She ended up texting me later to say she'd found another place to stay, and I could tell from her tone that she was hurt. She felt that I'd unfairly assumed something about her, and that my boundary made her feel judged. To be honest, I thought I was being responsible by bringing it up beforehand. It's not like I was accusing her of anything, I just wanted to be upfront about my comfort levels. But now, Sarah's comments are making me second guess myself. She's always been honest with me, and maybe I did make an unfair assumption about her. When I think back on how the conversation went down, I start to wonder if I should have worded things differently. Maybe my delivery came across as a bit harsh or mistrustful. The conversation had gone something like this. I'd said, "Hey, just a small thing, I'm totally okay with you staying here. But if you could, just please don't bring any guys back to the apartment." She'd looked a little taken aback, like the thought hadn't even crossed her mind. "Why would you even think that I'd do that?" She'd replied, a bit defensively. I know," I'd said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "It's just that. I know you're social and might meet people at the party. And well, I'm just kind of protective of my space." "Protective of your space?" she repeated, almost like she was testing the words out. "I get it. But it feels like you think I'd just pick up some random guy and bring him back to your place." I remember feeling a bit uncomfortable at that point, not wanting to come off as accusatory. "No, it's not like that, I promise," I'd assured her. "It's just a personal thing. My apartment feels kind of private, you know? It's where I feel most comfortable, and I'm just not used to people I don't know being here." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't really convinced. She'd muttered something about not being a teenager anymore and having some self-respect, and it stung a little because I'd never intended to imply anything like that. I knew I was walking a fine line, trying to balance my boundary with her autonomy, and I could tell she was feeling judged. After that conversation, things felt strained. She didn't text me as much, and I could sense that she was hurt. A few days later, she let me know she'd found another place to stay. Her message was polite but distant. "Thanks for the offer, but I found somewhere else. I'll catch you when you're back in town." It's been a few days since then, and I can't shake this nagging feeling that maybe I handled it all wrong. I really didn't mean to hurt Sarah or make her feel judged. She's my friend, and I value her, quirks and all. But I also feel that it's my apartment, my space, and I have a right to set my own boundaries in it. In hindsight, maybe I could have approached it differently. I could have just trusted her to be respectful without explicitly mentioning my no guys rule. But at the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable to feel uncomfortable with the idea of someone I don't know in my home. I'd never judge Sarah for how she lives her life. I just want to feel at ease in my own space. Now I'm left wondering if I owe her an apology or if I just need to give it time. I don't want to lose a friend over something like this, but I also don't want to feel guilty for having a boundary. Looking back on everything, I think part of the issue is that Sarah and I are just so different. She's always been more carefree, and I've always been more private. Maybe I should have considered that when we had the conversation. Friends should be able to have boundaries without feeling like it's an attack on their character. But maybe I didn't approach it in the best way. At the same time, I can't help but feel a little frustrated. Sarah's reaction makes me wonder if she really respects my comfort in the same way I respect her lifestyle. If the roles were reversed, I'd like to think I'd respect her wishes without getting upset. But maybe that's easier said than done. So Reddit, AITA here? Am I the bad friend for setting a boundary in my own apartment? Should I have trusted Sarah without saying anything? Or was it fair of me to want clear expectations in place? I genuinely want to know if I handled this wrong, especially if it means saving a friendship that's important to me. AITA for refusing to let my mother-in-law redecorate our nursery? The title says it all. AITA for refusing to let my mother-in-law redecorate our nursery? And believe me, this question barely scratches the surface of the whole ordeal. I never thought setting up a nursery would turn into such a battleground, but here we are. So, here's some background. I'm 26 years old, 32 weeks pregnant, and expecting my first child with my husband, Felix, 27. We've been beyond excited, getting everything ready, and it's been an overall positive experience, well, aside from one aspect, my mother-in-law, Mill. Felix and I have had a vision for this nursery since we found out we were expecting, and thankfully, with him being a builder, it's been relatively easy for us to make that vision a reality. We're going for a peaceful, minimalist vibe with soft colors and practical furnishings, which has been great, except for my Mill's constant interventions. To be fair, my Mill has always been a bit overbearing. In the past, I've managed to avoid direct confrontations with her by letting Felix handle things. But ever since we shared the pregnancy news, her meddling has reached new heights. She's over at our house all the time now, bringing her helpful suggestions that are actually just demands for how things should be done. She's also decided she needs to monitor me, apparently for the baby's sake. Not once, not twice, but many times, she's commented on my appearance. Just the other day, she gave me one of her classic motherly remarks. You should lose some weight. It's not healthy for the baby. I think it's worth mentioning that she knows I've struggled with anorexia in the past, so hearing her say this feels particularly cruel. For the record, I'm at a healthy weight, as confirmed by my doctor, but her comments have gotten under my skin. With each unannounced visit, she started feeling more entitled to help with the nursery. It started with small things, like commenting on the color scheme. Why don't you use brighter colors? She'd say, even though we'd chosen muted tones for a calming vibe. I thought I could just smile and nod, but it quickly escalated. A few weeks ago, she came over with an IKEA bag filled with random decorations, toys, and baby things. Now, I appreciate a thoughtful gift as much as the next person, but none of the items matched our nursery's theme, nor did they align with the safe, practical choices we'd made. There was a throw pillow with a big, sparkly owl on it, some fairy lights, and a large, stuffed giraffe that honestly looked like it was from another era. But I figured, hey, it's harmless. I thanked her and even placed some of the things in the room temporarily. I wanted to show her I wasn't dismissive and that I appreciated the gesture. But this was just the beginning. It's gotten to the point where she'll come over, wander into the nursery, and start rearranging things without asking. She has her own ideas of where the crib should go, where the changing table should be, and even how the toys should be arranged. I kept my mouth shut about it for a while, thinking that as long as she wasn't moving anything critical, it wouldn't hurt. However, the frustration was building up. It felt like my opinions and plans for this space didn't matter. Yesterday, she came over unannounced again. I'd been up all night with work, feeling exhausted, and definitely not in the mood to host anyone. She walks in, takes one look at me in my joggers, and has the audacity to say, "Really? Joggers?" Thank God Felix isn't here to see this. My patience was already wearing thin, but I still tried to let it go. Then, she immediately heads to the nursery, as she always does, and starts questioning me about why I'd removed the pillow she'd put in the crib and the fairy lights she'd hung up. I explained calmly that the pillow and lights were potential safety hazards for the baby. I'd read countless guides and spoken to my doctor about safe sleep practices. And loose items like pillows and string lights can be dangerous for an infant. But instead of understanding, she got defensive. She hit me with the classic, "Well, I raised 3 kids just fine, and they're all healthy. You young moms these days are just too overprotective." Then she followed up with, "You're really not going to be a good mother at this rate." That was it. I felt this surge of emotion. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Or maybe I'd finally just had enough. I told her to get out of the house. I wasn't yelling, but my voice was firm. I think she was so shocked that she actually left without much protest, but not without giving me a look like I'd slapped her across the face. When Felix came home, I told him everything. He's incredibly supportive and reassured me that I wasn't overreacting, but I could tell he was torn because he doesn't like confrontation, especially with his mom. He promised to talk to her about boundaries and explained that he'd make it clear she shouldn't be rearranging anything or coming over unannounced. Still, I felt uneasy. I hate conflict, especially with family, and the last thing I want is to put Felix in a difficult position. I started second guessing myself. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have been more patient with her and tried explaining things differently. I know she's excited about her first grandchild, and I don't want to take that away from her. But at the same time, I can't ignore the way she's crossed so many lines. Her actions made me feel like I wasn't capable of setting up my own child's nursery. And those comments about my weight and appearance? They're not just harmless remarks, they're reminders of a painful part of my past. And they're honestly just mean. So Reddit, AITA here. Am I being unreasonable for setting boundaries with my mother-in-law? Or do you think her actions cross the line? I feel stuck between wanting to stand my ground for my own mental health and not wanting to cause unnecessary family drama. Any advice on how to navigate this would be greatly appreciated, especially if anyone has dealt with overbearing family members during pregnancy. So, here's the situation that's currently causing me to question whether I'm being a huge jerk or just upholding a boundary. I have one non-negotiable when it comes to household responsibilities, and that's dealing with puke. I'll spare you the gory details, but basically, it's my biggest weakness. It doesn't matter whose it is or where it is. The second I smell it or even see it, I immediately feel the urge to puke myself. My wife is fully aware of this and has been since we first started dating. Usually, this isn't an issue because she very rarely drinks enough to get herself sick. We might go out a few times a year, and she'll have a glass or two of wine, but that's usually her limit. However, last night was one of those rare exceptions. We went to a Halloween party hosted by some friends of ours, and I was the designated driver for the night. My wife decided to really let loose and enjoy herself, which was totally fine with me. I was happy to be the responsible one for the evening, and it was fun watching her have such a good time. Over the course of the night, she polished off 2 entire bottles of wine. Not necessarily the best idea, but hey, it was a party, and she was clearly having fun, dancing, laughing, and just enjoying herself. We finally got home around 3:30 in the morning, and by that point, I could tell she was totally out of it. I helped her into bed and thought that would be the end of it. I was pretty tired myself, so I crashed as soon as my head hit the pillow. Then, at around 8 a.m., she woke me up, and from the look on her face, I could tell something was wrong. She looked pale, and it was clear she felt terrible. She asked me to help her get to the bathroom because she thought she was going to be sick. I groggily stumbled after her, half awake, just trying to support her to make sure she didn't fall or hurt herself. We made it to the bathroom in time, but unfortunately, she didn't quite make it to the toilet in the way she'd hoped. Long story short, she didn't manage to lift the toilet lid in time, and the results were disastrous. The puke went everywhere on the toilet, the floor, the walls, the garbage can, and probably places I haven't even discovered yet. It was as if a vomit bomb had exploded, and the bathroom was ground zero. I stood there in shock for a moment, taking it all in, and felt my own stomach start to turn. She looked at me, clearly in discomfort and embarrassed, and asked me if I could please clean it up. Now, I know that sounds like a simple request, but remember, puke is my absolute nemesis. Just the thought of getting on my hands and knees and scrubbing it up made me want to gag. I took a deep breath and told her that I really couldn't handle it. She looked a little hurt, but I figured she understood. I mean, it's been my one deal breaker from day one, and I thought she'd realize how difficult that would be for me. She didn't argue. She just shut the bathroom door and wandered off to the couch, muttering something under her breath that I couldn't quite catch. She's been trying to sleep off her hangover ever since, though she wakes up every hour or so to be sick again. I've been taking care of her in other ways, making sure she has water, grabbing her ginger ale, and even running out to the pharmacy to get her electrolyte powders and Pepto. I want to make her as comfortable as possible, and I do feel genuinely bad that she's feeling so awful. But every time I think about going in to clean that bathroom, I can't do it. The bathroom door is shut, and the mess is still there, untouched. Part of me feels guilty every time I walk past it because I know she probably feels terrible. And here I am, refusing to do the one thing that would really help her out. But at the same time, I just feel like I physically can't. I know some people can push through things that make them uncomfortable, but this is one of those things that I can't seem to get past. Here's the kicker. I'm starting to question if I'm actually being an unreasonable jerk by refusing to clean it up. She rarely drinks like this, and it's not like she got sick on purpose. I know she didn't plan to vomit everywhere and would probably prefer that none of this had happened. But I can't help but feel like my reaction is justified given my well-known aversion to vomit. When I told my brother about it over the phone, because who else am I supposed to ask about this, he laughed and said I was being a bit dramatic. But he also admitted he wouldn't want to deal with that mess either. He joked that if it were him, he'd pay someone to come in and clean it up. But obviously, I don't think that's an actual solution. It's just that I genuinely don't know how to handle it, especially when she looks so miserable. I'm torn between feeling like a horrible partner for not just helping her out in her time of need, and feeling like I have a right to hold this boundary, given my extreme reaction to puke. I've been doing everything else I can think of to make up for it. But at this point, she's still half-heartedly ignoring me from the couch, and I can't tell if she's really mad or just embarrassed. So, AITA for refusing to clean up my wife's puke? Should I just suck it up, put on a mask, and get it over with? Or am I justified in holding my ground on this one? AITA for volunteering to help with my stepsisters for the wrong reasons. So, let me give you some background. My dad married my stepmother 6 years ago, and at that time, my stepsisters were just toddlers 2 and 3 years old. Their biological dad was completely out of the picture, and my family dynamic changed pretty significantly when my dad remarried. Before that, I was just dealing with my own stuff after my mom passed away, and the idea of having step-siblings was not something I really thought about. My mom died 14 months before my dad's wedding, and while I was still grieving, he was moving on with his life. Now, my stepsisters are 8 and 9 years old, and even though I've been in their lives for a while, I don't feel a strong bond with them. Sometimes we spend time together, but honestly, it's mostly because they ask for it. I don't have that natural inclination to hang out with them, and I don't enjoy our time together the way my dad hopes I would. He encourages me to embrace my role as their brother, but I just don't feel that connection. It's not that I dislike them, it's just that we don't share that sibling bond. For them, it's entirely different. They were so young when my dad got married, and they've grown up seeing me as their brother. They call me their brother, and it feels strange because I don't share those feelings for them. They think of me as family, but I still see them as my stepsisters and nothing more. Here's where it gets a bit complicated. Whenever my dad or stepmother can't take the girls somewhere like to the park, a friend's house, or even to get a snack, I often volunteer to help out. The reason I do this is simple. I get paid for it. It's a straightforward arrangement. I spend time with them, and I earn some extra cash in the process. I figured it was a win-win situation. I'm fulfilling my dad's wishes to be a good brother. They get someone to hang out with, and I get paid. But recently, my dad figured out my true motivations for volunteering. During some of my therapy sessions, yes, I see a therapist, he joined in and began piecing things together. He realized I didn't volunteer out of love for my stepsisters or a desire to spend time with them. Instead, I was motivated by the money. When he confronted me about it, I could see the disappointment in his eyes, and honestly, it stung. He expressed how hurtful my actions were, especially since the girls are so young and innocent. He reminded me that they see me as their brother, and he fears it's going to hurt them deeply in a couple of years when they realize I don't reciprocate their love. My dad emphasized that 6 years of being siblings meant nothing to me, and he can't comprehend how I haven't developed a protective or caring instinct for them by now. I understand where he's coming from, I see his perspective, and I can imagine how he feels. But I also can't shake the feeling that I'm doing what I can to make the best of a situation that was thrust upon me. The whole thing has put a strain on our relationship. My dad keeps bringing it up, constantly reminding me of his disappointment, and it makes me feel guilty. I don't want to hurt him, and I certainly don't want to hurt my stepsisters. But I also feel trapped in this situation. I don't want to pretend to care for them when I don't feel that way. I know some people might think I should just suck it up and try harder to build that bond, but I'm not sure how to do that. My dad seems to think I should have developed some kind of instinct to care for them as a brother, but I genuinely don't know how to feel that way. I've tried to engage with them more, but it feels forced. I can't help but think that if I pretended to be their brother, I would be doing them a disservice in the long run. So, either for volunteering to help with my stepsisters for the wrong reasons, I feel like I'm just trying to navigate a complicated family dynamic, but I can't shake the feeling that I've let everyone down. AITA for telling my wife her parents will die. I, 39 male, and my wife, 36 female, have been together for 14 years, and I consider our marriage to be one of the great successes of my life. We rarely argue, we complement each other well, and we've built a fulfilling life together. However, there's one issue that has been weighing heavily on my mind, revolving around my wife's relationship with her family, particularly her parents. To provide some background, my wife grew up in a pretty stable and nurturing environment. She had a middle-class upbringing, filled with the usual childhood experiences, but no major traumas or issues that I've ever been aware of. Her parents were loving and did their best to raise her and her brother in a positive environment. While they are divorced now, they maintain a good relationship and share a strong bond with their children. They live about 1,200 miles away, so we don't get to see them as often as I would like. But they have always been there for us, providing support when we needed it, whether emotionally or financially. I often think of them as embodying the wholesome, predictable nature of a Hallmark Channel family. Their love and support for each other and us is something I genuinely cherish. In stark contrast to my wife's family life, I experienced profound loss early in my adult life. Shortly after marrying my wife, my father passed away, followed by my mother just a year later. The grief was overwhelming. I had been incredibly close to both of them. Losing them left a gaping hole in my life, and I often find myself reflecting on moments I took for granted, the phone calls I didn't make, the visits I postponed, and the times I thought I'd have next time to connect. Those regrets haunt me deeply. Given my past, I feel an intense desire to foster a close connection between my wife and her family. It pains me to watch her neglect that relationship. My wife tends to be distant when it comes to family communication. She often doesn't make any effort to reach out to her parents or even her brother. It's not that she dislikes them, far from it, but she just seems indifferent. Whenever I ask her if she's spoken to her family, she usually responds with a nonchalant, "I will later." Yet that later never seems to come. There have been instances when her mother has expressed her feelings about the lack of communication. I recall one particular time when her mother remarked, "I know everyone is busy, but I wish my children would reach out a little more." That comment struck a chord with me. It felt heartbreaking. Here were two parents who had invested so much love into their children, and now they were left feeling neglected and unappreciated. I struggle to understand why my wife can't see the value in nurturing that relationship, especially considering how kind and supportive her parents have been to us. A few weeks ago, I reached a breaking point. After one of her typical responses of, "I'll call them later," I finally confronted her. I shared my feelings, emphasizing how important it is to maintain contact with family. I spoke about how much I miss my own parents and how the regrets of not reaching out while I had the chance weigh heavily on me. I wanted her to understand that I don't want her to go through the same pain I did. But instead of engaging in a meaningful discussion, she dismissed it, saying she didn't feel the same way and didn't want to talk about it. Then came the turning point. A couple of days later, her parents sent us some money to help with an unexpected medical bill. I was grateful and took the opportunity to thank them. In that moment, I encouraged my wife to reach out to them as well, reminding her that it's important to acknowledge their support. Yet, once again, she said she would do it later. Frustration boiled over inside me. It's hard to articulate the emotions that surged at that moment, but I felt overwhelmed. My heart raced as I snapped, "You know, they'll be dead someday, and there won't be a later." The moment those words left my mouth, I regretted them. I could see the hurt in her eyes as she started to cry. I immediately realized how cruel and thoughtless my comment was. In that instant, I knew I had crossed a line. I tried to apologize, explaining that my own baggage regarding my parents and my grief had affected my reaction. I genuinely wanted her to see the importance of reaching out while she still had the chance. But her response cut me to the core. She told me that she would never be able to forgive me and that she would always think about how cruel I had been to her. It's been several days since that heated exchange, and the atmosphere in our home feels thick with tension and unspoken words. I know I messed up, and I wish I could take back what I said, but my mind is still plagued by questions. Why can't she just make the effort to reach out to her parents? Why does she let weeks go by without a single word? I see her parents as loving and supportive people, and I can't wrap my head around her indifference. It's as if she's waiting for a tragic event to motivate her to reach out, but I fear that will be too late. I've tried to approach her gently since the incident, attempting to show her that my intentions were rooted in love and concern, but it feels like every time I bring up the topic, it only deepens the rift between us. I think about how I lost my parents, and the weight of that loss is a heavy burden that I carry. My desire to protect her from similar pain makes me vocal about my feelings, yet my words have driven a wedge between us. I've tried to communicate that I just want her to seize the opportunities she has now, but I'm met with walls. I see the anguish in her face, and I hate that I've caused her pain. At the same time, I can't help but feel that my concerns are valid. I just want her to understand the importance of family and how fleeting life can be. I've been left with regrets that I can never change, and I don't want her to experience that kind of heartbreak. Now I'm left grappling with the consequences of my words, wondering if I've irreparably damaged our relationship. Have I turned my genuine concern into something hurtful and cruel? Ida for telling my wife her parents will die? I never intended to hurt her, but my emotions overwhelmed me. And now I find myself regretting not just my words, but also the way I've expressed my fears and concerns. I'm hoping for clarity, not just for myself, but for my wife, too. Ida for being totally unfair to my mom's husband's family by not showing up for a family meal. I, 16 female, find myself in a complicated situation regarding my family, and it has been weighing heavily on my mind. My mom has been married to her husband, whom I'll call Ted, for 7 years now. My biological dad has been absent from my life for almost as long. Even before my mom married Ted, my dad was not a significant presence. He struggles with severe mental illness, which has deeply affected his ability to be a reliable parent. The last I remember of him, he was in a bad place, unable to care for himself, let alone for me. Despite this, I still love him and cherish the good memories we shared. Ted, on the other hand, tries hard to step into the role of a father. He provides for me and often calls me his daughter, attempting to create a familial bond. He even offered to adopt me, which I declined. I wanted to keep my relationship with my biological dad intact, despite Ted's encouragement to sever ties. The primary reason I didn't want to be adopted, however, is because of how often Ted disparages my dad. He frequently reminds me that my dad chose illness over me and that he has never contributed financially. Ted and his family often paint my dad as a crazy waste of life, which feels incredibly hurtful and dismissive of my feelings. The tension between these two sides of my life has become even more complicated after I developed a mental illness myself. Last year, I was diagnosed with OCD, which I had suspected I inherited from my father's side of the family. The signs were always there. I had strict routines and rules that others found excessive. For example, I needed to make my bed a certain way, had to keep my school supplies organized in a specific order, and would become distressed if my belongings didn't fit in an organized way on my shelves. When my mental health crisis hit, I ended up spending some time in an inpatient facility to get the help I needed. After my hospitalization, I noticed a shift in how Ted and his family spoke about me. They often discussed my struggles in a way that made me uncomfortable, suggesting that my decision to reject Ted was somehow causing my illness. It felt like they were blaming my mental health on my relationship with my biological dad, rather than recognizing that I was dealing with my own struggles, which had nothing to do with my familial choices. Ted would talk about how he could have prevented my mental illness if I had embraced him as my father. Recently, Ted's parents wanted to host a big family dinner, and I was repeatedly told by them, as well as by Ted and my mom, that my presence was desired. They expressed how important it was for me to be there, as if my absence would somehow diminish their family's unity. However, after careful consideration, I chose not to attend. I told them I couldn't get off my planner right now, and that was true. I had commitments and routines that I was adhering to. But deep down, I knew I couldn't face the pressure of being around Ted's family. When I opted out, my mom and Ted were not pleased. They argued that I didn't have trouble rearranging my planner to see my grandparents or my uncles and cousins. They insisted I was being totally unfair to Ted's family and accused me of treating them as if they weren't family at all. Their words stung, and I felt a rush of guilt. I know that Ted has tried to step up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that being around his family would only exacerbate my discomfort. The reality is, I do love my dad, despite his flaws and the pain he's caused through his absence. I feel a loyalty to him that makes it difficult to fully embrace Ted's narrative that my dad is worthless. I'm navigating my mental illness while also trying to figure out my feelings about my family dynamics. It feels like a balancing act one that often leaves me feeling alone and misunderstood. So here I am, grappling with guilt for not attending the dinner, feeling like I've let down Ted's family while also protecting my own emotional well-being. I understand that they want to feel included and appreciated, but I can't help but feel suffocated by the pressure to conform to a family dynamic that feels forced. I wonder if I'm being unfair or if I'm simply trying to take care of my mental health. AITA for choosing not to show up for the family meal. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I also know that being there might push me into a place I'm not ready to face. AITA for refusing to drive my coworkers home without compensation. I'm a 25-year-old male, and I work in an office where teamwork is emphasized. I've been at this job for about 6 months, and I've enjoyed building relationships with my coworkers. When I first started, I offered to give rides to those who needed them. The requests were infrequent at first, so it felt easy to accommodate them. I didn't mind making a few detours because I had an old but reliable car, a 1999 Ford Fiesta. It was my first car, and while it wasn't anything fancy, it was economical and barely cost me anything in gas. Fast forward to now, I recently had the opportunity to buy a new car, a supercar. This was something I had dreamed about for years, and I was thrilled to finally make that purchase. My old Fiesta was great for what it was, but this new car is a game changer. It's sleek, fast, and a head turner. My coworkers were excited too. They frequently compliment my new ride, and it's become a talking point at the office. However, as soon as I got the new car, the requests for rides skyrocketed. Suddenly, I found myself inundated with requests from coworkers who wanted lifts home. What had once been an occasional favor turned into a near daily occurrence. Initially, I didn't mind. It was fun to show off my new car and to help my coworkers. Plus, it felt good to contribute to the office camaraderie. But soon, I started to realize that while I loved the car, it came with new responsibilities, especially financial ones. My new car, while an incredible upgrade, doesn't get nearly the same fuel efficiency as my old Fiesta. I was now averaging about 12 to 13 kilometers per liter, which made each detour significantly more expensive than I had anticipated. I hadn't accounted for the increased fuel costs when I decided to be more generous with my rides. Over the course of the past month, I had made over 100 detours to drop off coworkers. Each ride was roughly a 15 to 20-minute detour, and I quickly became aware that this was adding up. While I was initially happy to help, I started to feel resentful because not once did any of them offer any form of compensation. I understood that they relied on public transportation, but I began to feel like my generosity was being taken for granted. Then, one day, it hit me. I realized that I was spending more on gas than I was making in tips at work, which is not how I wanted to spend my time or money. After reflecting on this for a few days, I decided it was time to set some boundaries. I'd had enough of being the go-to driver without any recognition of the costs involved. So, when a coworker asked me for a lift home, I replied, "Sure, but if you can pay me the fee you would have to for public transport, I'll be happy to drive you home." I thought this was a reasonable request, given that they would have to pay for transportation regardless. However, their reaction was shocking. It was as if I had committed a grave sin. They looked at me in disbelief, and I could see the confusion on their faces. They began questioning why I was suddenly charging for rides that I had been giving for free. It felt like I had stepped on a landmine. The air grew thick with tension. Some coworkers argued that it was unfair to suddenly start asking for money, pointing out that I had been the nice guy who helped everyone out. They insisted that I should continue to do so, given my financial situation and the fact that I was driving a luxury vehicle. Others even implied that I was being selfish and that friendship should come without a price tag. It felt dismissive, and honestly, it stung. In their eyes, I was the villain for wanting to protect my finances. They failed to see that my willingness to help came with a cost, and now I felt like I had betrayed their expectations. I tried explaining my position, but it only seemed to fuel their outrage. I was met with comments like, "It's just a ride, why are you making this so complicated?" Or, "We thought we were friends." It felt like I was being painted as the bad guy simply for trying to be responsible with my money. What made matters worse was that many of them would discuss my car in a way that felt condescending. They'd mention how fortunate I was to have it, as if that automatically negated any concerns I had about spending money. I found myself torn between wanting to be a good coworker and the need to set boundaries for my own financial well-being. As I walked away from that conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. Was I really being unreasonable? Should I have just continued to absorb the costs? It was hard not to feel bad about disappointing my coworkers, especially since I had built these relationships over the last 6 months. I wanted to maintain a positive atmosphere at work, but I also wanted to be clear about my limits. In the days following my refusal, the atmosphere shifted. Some coworkers stopped asking for rides altogether, while others seemed to treat me with a bit more distance. I sensed the divide forming. It was as if I had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. A few colleagues voiced their opinions, suggesting that I was being greedy and that I should have just kept giving rides as a courtesy. This whole experience has been eye-opening for me. I've come to understand that kindness and generosity can sometimes be taken for granted, and that not everyone will understand when you need to set boundaries. I value the relationships I've built with my coworkers, but I also need to take care of my own financial situation. So here I am, feeling conflicted. I want to be a supportive coworker, but I also want to be fair to myself. AITA for refusing to drive my coworkers home without compensation? It's a tricky situation, and I genuinely don't know if I'm in the wrong. I appreciate the camaraderie we have, but I also feel that my generosity should be recognized and appreciated. Balancing kindness with self care can be challenging, and right now, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing.